Sorry, let's continue.
We've noticed that Dr. Chapatin falls in love with women regardless of the age difference. Would he be able to marry a 28-year-old woman?
I'd prefer two 14-year-olds. The controversies surrounding the cast of Chavo del Ocho have fueled the mass media for 50 years, and now they've come back in full force. In mid-2025, Chespirito regained popularity following the premiere of Sin Querer Queriendo, a series that promises to unveil the behind-the-scenes life of Chespirito, the world's most famous Mexican screenwriter and actor. The series, produced by the children of Roberto Gómez Bolaños and loosely based on his memoirs, quickly sparked a storm of controversy. Many of them are linked to Florinda MEZA, who plays Doña Florinda. The woman claims that what is shown on screen is an idealized story, but that it has nothing to do with what really happened. Who is telling the truth? Which part of the story does each side prefer to keep secret? Although Florinda MEZA claims that all this alleged defamation is affecting her health, many did not hesitate to keep adding fuel to the fire. Thus, unintentionally, she brought to the surface many questions that revolve around the lesser-known side of Chespirito and his creations. But let's not get ahead of ourselves. Is Florinda a manipulative and vengeful influence who even speculated about Chespirito's death? Why did Ramón Valdez, for many the most beloved of the old show, end up leaving it?
And all because he owed 14 months of rent.
And speaking of Don Ramón, is it true that he predicted his own death? How was the epic fight between Carlos Villagrán and María Antonieta de las Nieves against Bolaños to gain control? About the characters Kiko and La Chilindrina? What are they talking about when they mention Kiko's cursed medallion? Is it true that the Witch of 71 had a gorilla past? Is there any lost media from El Chavo del? What outrageous and unusual theories did this show spark? Did its creator end up with dementia? All these questions are answered in today's video, where we'll explore the dark side of Chespirito. Are you a fan of the Chespirito series? What are your thoughts on it? I'm curious to know if you enjoy watching it or not. Let me remind you that on another one of our channels, we have a lot of specials about El Chavo del Ocho. The day Chespirito, Don Ramón, and the Witch of 71 died, we have a special. So if you're interested in this topic, I'll leave the link as well so you can go watch these videos on our other channel. The day we begin.
Before the kid was born.
First and foremost, I'm a writer. Later, I became an actor, director, and other things. But I started as a writer, and writing is the most important thing to me.
Roberto Gómez Bolaños was born into a typical Mexican middle-class family. Roberto's mother was named Elsa Bolaños Cacho, and she was a woman everyone described as kind and disciplined. She was also very determined, to the point that Roberto's very existence was due to her own conviction. When she was still pregnant, the doctors warned her that a medication she had been taking could seriously affect the fetus. Despite recommendations to have an abortion due to the risk of severe malformations, Elsa refused and went ahead until she gave birth to a baby without any health problems. For her, he was a special child, not only because of his unusual pregnancy, but also because of the personality he developed over the years. He was an outgoing, creative, and independent child, but he always maintained a very close and endearing bond with his mother. There's another rather peculiar fact about the woman, a fact that has to do with her lineage. Elsa was the cousin of the man who would become president of Mexico, Gustavo Díaz Ordaz. His term lasted from 1964 to 1970, quite contemporary to the rise of Chespirito's popularity on television. Many would see the relationship between the two as more than coincidence. Art was always close to Roberto, as his father, Francisco Gómez Linares, was an illustrator and painter. He was a man who surely would have been proud to see what his son became, but unfortunately he didn't have the chance to watch him grow up. Francisco passed away after suffering a stroke when the boy was only 6 years old. Besides the emotional blow that this meant, the family went through a severe financial crisis. For that reason, Roberto approached a circus that was in front of his house to help out with the shows and raise money. There he first encountered a profession that would soon make him a millionaire. However, before that happened, misfortune stubbornly continued to follow little Roberto. And at the age of 10, he had to leave school and his friends because of an emergency rabies treatment after being bitten by a dog. The dog never came back to apologize. But he didn't waste that opportunity and devoted himself to reading and reading, finishing the forging of his destiny. When he returned to school, he discovered something terrible. All his classmates had had a growth spurt, something that hadn't happened to him. They soon began mocking and teasing him about his height. Later in life, Bolaños popularized the saying, "Revenge is never good, it kills the soul and poisons it." If that phrase had applied to his childhood, we could say he spent it poisoning himself without scruples. The thing is, Roberto started hitting those who were insolent, and with his bare fists, he managed to make up for the inches he lacked in height. He even practiced boxing, a discipline in which he actually competed, developing new and varied physical skills. He earned medals and honors thanks to the noses he broke, something his mother never celebrated. Anyway, the young man quickly got bored of the gloves. Time. Later, he tried to enter the world of soccer, but was unsuccessful. He also tried his luck at university, studying engineering, but he had to drop out in his second year because he needed a job. He still felt a bit lost, not realizing that his potential was in what he did most naturally. Roberto wrote the songs for the summer camp festivals and read story excerpts to those closest to him. They were things he did as a hobby, things he was actually really good at. When he saw an ad in the newspaper, all his alarms went off. An advertising agency needed apprentices to work in radio and television. Roberto showed up for the call and almost fell into despair. He found a long line. Were they all aspiring producers? He thought he didn't have as much experience as the others and was about to leave when he noticed a small but significant detail. On the side, there was another line, much shorter. It was the line for those who wanted to apply as writers. Roberto, impulsive and brave, joined that line and wished himself the best of luck. A unique and unprecedented journey was beginning at that very moment. The birth of a neighborhood. An enthusiastic Roberto began in that underworld with small creative tasks. He quickly realized that his thing was writing stories, and he started making his way as a scriptwriter for director Agustín Porfirio Delgado. It was him who ended up giving him the nickname that would stay with him for the rest of his life. He was dazzled by the ideas that came from Roberto's mind, and the ease with which he managed to turn them into a story. He called him a little Shakespeare, a Chespirito, a small Shakespeare.
Who is Chespirito? Me? Is it your pseudonym? And a director gave it to me. Between a director and a producer who were the first to bring to the big screen a script written by me. They liked it a lot and praised me. They complimented me. They told me I was a little Shakespeare.
But Roberto also had acting talent. Roberto soon found himself in movies with two hugely popular Mexican comedians in the late 1950s, Veruta and Capulina. Many of these episodes were captured in the first episodes of Max's series, which alternates between two timelines. The one about the process in which Chespirito makes his way into television, and the times when Chespirito's cast begins to break apart at the end of the 70s. At this point, it should be added that sometime before the idea that would change his life finally took shape. Chespirito was hired by the emerging Channel 8 of Mexico to develop comedy and family programs. The idea was to present clean humor sketches, physical gags, and comedic sequences that would bring freshness to a somewhat stagnant medium. Under that premise, Chespirito created the super geniuses of the square table and later the red grasshopper. But what would truly launch his career to the ends of the earth was El Chavo del Ocho, where he was able to create a fictional universe that would revolutionize Latin American comedy television. The neighborhood would become the starting point for a gallery of characters that deeply impacted several generations of viewers, with a relevance that, in many countries like Brazil and Argentina, continues to this day. To bring the show to life, Chespirito recruited actors who gradually joined the ranks of the series. As the show grew, more settings were added, in addition to the courtyard where most of the scenes took place. We also saw several of the houses, the street, the backyard, the field where the kids played soccer, and even the school. Later on, in a somewhat less glamorous stage, Doña Florinda's inn would appear. The camaraderie and chemistry between the actors seemed to go beyond the screen. The kids who watched the show assumed that the affection between these actors was genuine. In short, everything seemed to radiate an almost idyllic kindness. Doña Florinda really did appear to overprotect Kiko. And is she really that in love with Professor Girafales? La Chilindrina, despite her mischief, loved her father, Don Ramon, and he was clearly the passionate romantic interest of the Witch of 71. Senor Barriga was serious and got very angry with El Chavo, but deep down he found him endearing and let his mischief slide, which in the end were done without really meaning to.
If we remove Don Ramon like a chess piece, Doña Florinda is left without a son and with no one to hit. The Witch of 71. She lived in the neighborhood for Don Ramon, who never paid rent to Senor Barriga. Don Ramon protected El Chavo. Without Don Ramon, La Chilindrina becomes an orphan and the show ends, even with Kiko still there.
But over the years, we discovered that fiction doesn't always reflect what really happened among the cast members. As the show grew in popularity, so did the ambition of the actors. The egos started to become a snowball that threatened to take down the most successful show of the moment. No child, from the comfort and safety of their home, could imagine what happened when the spotlights went out.
The romance with Florinda?
By the time Chespirito began to find success, he was already married to Graciela Fernández since his youth and had 6 children. But the filming of the shows demanded more and more of his time. International tours had begun. And at a certain point, Chespirito felt that he was spending more hours with his co-workers than with his real family. So some things started to get tense. Florinda Meza was in a relationship with the show's director, Enrique Segoviano, but gradually the relationship between her and Chespirito became closer and closer. They grew very close, spent much time together, and gradually fell in love. This likely occurred around October. In 1977, they began an extramarital relationship which led to Bolaños' divorce in 1989. By then, the relationship between Florinda and him was well known by everyone, and it was not just a personal bond, but also a professional one. As the distance between them grew shorter, Florinda began to play a more active role in the creative decisions of El Chavo del Ocho, and the rivalries began. Several cast members began to feel that she always had the final say and that her character was taking over more and more scenes, at the expense of her co-stars' time to shine. The first actors to show their discontent were Carlos Villagran and Ramón Valdez. The first one, many years later, even said that his distance from Florinda was for personal reasons. He claimed that she was in love with him and that they had a brief romance, after which Florinda supposedly pursued him for a long time.
That you were involved with Doña Florinda and that's where the trouble started? No, I wasn't involved with Doña Florinda. Doña Florinda was involved with me. It's different. It was very complicated. Was she harassing you? Yes, she was harassing me with my mom. She was harassing me with...
The woman, for her part, always denied the relationship and even called him an idiot for repeating the same story for years. The presence of Florinda was always a controversial element, and as the classic actors started leaving the show, a myth was built around her. She was portrayed as a great villain and was bluntly blamed for the show eventually losing its appeal. In fact, she was almost immediately labeled as the Yoko Ono of the show, referring to Lennon's partner, whom many blame for the breakup of the Beatles. Kiko and Don Ramon's exit marked the start of the cast's departure and a lengthy period of actor disputes. Disagreements that fueled increasingly outrageous speculations. But what really happened for those who had literally touched the sky with their hands in the series to suddenly decide to walk away?
Tell your mom on him. This character, Kiko, yes, of course. Just like you took away my whiskey, did you also take this character from Gómez Bolaños, or is Kiko yours? Well, he didn't drink.
The truth is that the hostile atmosphere had already been declared, and the breaking point seemed to be a tour that the cast did in 1975. During a visit to Chile, Villagran said that the audience cheered for him more than for Chespirito, and that created a spiral of jealousy that ended up ejecting him from the show. Conversely, the series Sin Querer, Queriendo Dar presents a different version, suggesting the breaking point occurred during the well-known Acapulco trip, which became a 3-episode saga where the characters from the neighborhood spend their vacation on paradise beaches. It's an episode that marks the end of the golden era of the show forever. according to the series by Max Villagran, who appears under a pseudonym. To avoid legal conflicts, he had already decided to leave the show. To distance himself from Roberto and exploit the character of Kiko on his own? According to what he himself said, it was his character and he knew perfectly well how to make the most of it without Bolaños getting involved. But nothing would be that simple. Villagran accuses Chespirito of kicking him off the show, while other sources claim he left voluntarily. To create his own show? This version says that he took Ramón Valdés with him, whom he had convinced that they could succeed on their own.
No one made me laugh as much as Ramón Valdés. Maybe not even Tintan, his brother, nor Cantinflas. Ramón had a superior charm. Nothing more than. He wasn't interested in being in the spotlight. He just wanted to earn a steady income for his needs and nothing more.
He didn't have any artistic ambitions?
Alternatively, some suggest that Valdés left not because Kiko requested it, but to show solidarity with him. But we'll have time to talk in depth about Don Ramón later. Regardless of what really occurred, Villagran's calculations were incorrect. Not only were the shows he did from then on spectacular failures, but many people saw it as obvious that what those shows were missing were Roberto's scripts and his characteristic humor. To make matters worse, Chespirito was not at all pleased with Villagran's decision to keep playing the character and took legal action. Preventing him from using the name Kiko, since he had it registered, Villagran tried other strategies, like renaming the character Kiko with a K or Federico and performing in circuses and television shows in Argentina, Venezuela, and other countries. But nothing matched the overwhelming success of those years. It is rumored that Chespirito or Florinda may have played a role in that failure. Villagran was reportedly banned from Televisa and many other networks across the continent. Yes, according to some, that good-natured and smiling Mexican actor and businessman. He was a controlling person who, behind the scenes, was responsible for deciding who could advance in the entertainment circuits of those years. Was there really a tyrant of that caliber behind El Chavo? But there's an even stranger and more lurid story. An urban legend surrounds Carlos Villagran and points to the deaths of actors that occurred in the years following his departure. This story puts at the center of the scene a medallion that is often seen around Kiko's neck. It reportedly has initials that intrigued internet users. On the pendant, you can supposedly read RARMERF. Many associate those letters with the initials of Ramón Valdés, Angelines Fernández, Roberto Gómez Bolaños, María Antonieta de las Nieves, Edgar Vivar, Rubén Aguirre, and Florinda MEZA. But the most unsettling thing is that the first three died in that order: Ramón, Angeline, and Roberto. The theory was very popular for years, although it faded away over time. Rubén Aguirre died in 2016 from diabetes and health issues caused by an unhealthy lifestyle. But his death contradicted the prediction, since his previously mentioned colleagues María Antonieta de las Nieves and Edgar Vivar are still alive. Is this necklace a lethal compass like in the movie Final Destination? Villagran denied the theory, clarifying that the medallion is Chinese and lacks the alleged letters. This myth aligns with the idea that Villagran held a great grudge against his castmates, who didn't support him consistently. Over time, when he chose to step away from the show, yes, he had an ambivalent friendship with María Antonieta, who had a similar dispute with Chespirito over her character. But Villagran ended up isolating himself quite a bit from the rest and fighting alone for what he believed in. It had been unfair treatment from Bolaños towards him.
Let me tell you the story of this coin. It's a Chinese coin that I didn't even know what it said, but it's in Chinese. It says Democratic Republic, China. That's what the coin says. Democratic China. That's what the coin says.
But there's always someone.
Bad people who want it to be a coin. What did you say to me?
A talisman?
Talisman, please.
If we needed more evidence that things ended poorly between Chespirito's family and Villagran, just look at the Max series, where the actor who played Kiko is shown as an egotist, individualist, and schemer who tried to take advantage of the show's success for his own benefit. He did the Kiko,
But later he even told me that he was... And then he filed a lawsuit against me. I won it very easily because I had, among other things, for some merchandising, they say it had been organized in Peru. They asked us for the signatures of all the actors. When I say they asked us, I mean my brother Horatio and me, since I was in charge. So everyone said yes, we acknowledge the author.
Roberto, are you on bad terms with
Chespirito right now? Not exactly on bad terms, it's just that my show came out and I've been relentlessly pursued in 17 countries. He sent me letters, money orders, circulars, telling people not to hire me because the character wasn't mine, it was his. Otherwise, would they be sued by him? I went more than a year without working.
But the medallion incident wasn't the only bizarre story related to this children's show.
Strange moments from the series.
Although it was a show for the whole family, many strange things also happened in front of the cameras. While a real war of egos was breaking out behind the scenes, the show had some truly unsettling moments, although many of the episodes were done several times with different casts. Over the course of 25 years, there was one that aired only once and was never seen again. The reason? Complaints from the Catholic Church, which holds great weight and influence in Mexico. The censored episode in question showed nothing less than the wedding between Don Ramon and Doña Clotilde, with a white dress and in a church during a ceremony led by Professor Girafales. It aired in Mexico, but instantly Televisa received a warning from the church which considered it offensive. That a single character, like the one played by Aguirre who constantly flirted with a widow, would take on the role of a priest. The television network gave in to the pressure and erased all traces of the episode, although it survived in collective memory and ended up being published a few years ago on YouTube. Thus, it stopped being a story with hints of legend and was fully confirmed. But even more disturbing is the story of the so-called episode 142, because in it, you could have seen the death of El Chavo. It is said that the episode in question never aired because its content was too sad and dramatic, since the main character of the series was run over by a car. Supposedly, the cast opposed finishing the filming of that episode and finally Chespirito decided not to release it. There's also a theory that all of this is a big fake, based on a simple mistake. In the digital versatile disc edition of the show, in fact, the numbering of the episode skips number 142. But the production explained that it was simply a mistake and that such a thing never existed. Another dark story surrounding Chavo, like his death. It has to do with private performances that the cast used to do in addition to the television broadcasts. It was Villagran again who revealed that in 1981, Chespirito received an offer of $1 million to perform in Medellin, Colombia. But it wasn't a normal private party. Apparently it was an event organized by the biggest drug lord of the time, Pablo Escobar. The cast of El Chavo did visit the country that year and even met with the Colombian president at the time, but it was never clear if they attended the meeting. Sources linked to drug trafficking have said conflicting things. One of Pablo Escobar's sons denied the rumor, but the son of another drug lord did not. Gilberto Rodriguez Orejuela stated that not just once but several times, the cast participated in events financed by the Cali and Medellin cartels. Beyond all these issues, over time, the show declined in both its audience ratings and its quality. The goose that laid the golden eggs grew fatigued and the show ultimately ended. On January 7th, 1980, after 290 episodes, a bit tired of being on screen, Chespirito went back to writing for theater. He created the play Once a Doce, and you know what? Yes, he kept proving that his pen still had a lot to say. Once a Doce was first staged in Mexico, but was successfully performed in South American countries like Peru and Colombia. Although it was a play that started with very little audience, word of mouth did its job. And when they were about to cancel it, the full theaters kept coming one after another. The play ended up offering 6 performances a week and would become the longest running play in Mexico, a record it still holds to this day. In Chile, the cast performed twice at the National Stadium for a total audience of approximately 160,000 spectators. So, all the great popular enthusiasm wanted more of Chavo. It was well known that even though the series had ended, that didn't mean the end of the controversies. And that's how our story goes back to the beginning. The farewell of...
Well, this last name, Valdez, is one of the most important last names in the history of theater in Mexico. Tintin and his brother, Marcelo Tintin.
Well, may he always rest in peace.
Do you have a big family? Yes, how many children do you have?
In a gallery of celebrities and characters who remained forever in the hearts of the public, there is a consensus that Don Ramon was everyone's favorite. His grumpy and rustic character with a good heart captured the attention of adults and children alike. And a big part of that is thanks to the great performance of Ramón Valdés. The man came from a humble and large family, closely connected to the artistic world. He had been acting since 1949, but he became world famous with the role that Chespirito wrote for him. It's said it came so naturally to Valdés because he was truly like that. A person without material ambitions and simple, who smoked a lot, a whole lot to be honest. But this addiction quickly took its toll on him, and after he was no longer on Bolaños' show, he knew he didn't have much time left. By 1988, he was 63 years old and in poor health. The diagnosis of stomach cancer had led to an even worse outlook, metastasis. The disease was spreading to his spinal cord and cutting it off in stages. By that time, Valdés was part of A.K. Kiko, Villagrán's show, and together they decided to give the character an ending that would turn out to be premonitory. In that last episode, Kiko made a bet with a friend to see who was brave enough to spend the night among the graves. Don Ramon, worried about the mischief the kids were planning, went to look for them, and in the last scene, he walked through the cemetery gates until he was surrounded by the night and the mist coming from the place. Thus, swallowed by the darkness, he left the show and a few days later passed away from cardiorespiratory arrest. At his wake, he was only by the coffin for a few hours. One person who had acted with him in El Chavo was Angelina Fernández, better known as the Witch of 71. Not everyone knew it, but off-camera she was his best friend, his confidant, and an actress who carried a dark past on her shoulders. From guerrilla fighter to witch. If the world connected to Chespirito gave way to some of the most striking stories, Angelines Fernández's is without a doubt the most surprising. Born in Madrid in the mid-1930s, she had a rising acting career until the Civil War began and she chose a side. She joined the guerrilla forces to defend the Republic, but when Francoism triumphed, she was forced into exile, while she watched her comrades being kidnapped and executed. She started a new life in Mexico and would eventually become an icon of the golden age of Mexican cinema in the 1950s. But 2 decades later, television was taking over and Angelines wanted to try her luck on the small screen. By then, she had already formed a strong friendship with Ramón Valdés, and it was he who suggested she talk to Chespirito to join El Chavo del Ocho. The character of Doña Clotilde allowed Angelines to explore a comedic side she hadn't delved into much before, and also to break some stereotypes. Although the Witch of 71 was essentially a bitter old maid, she managed to give her deeper nuances. She was also a self-sufficient woman who didn't allow anyone to disrespect her. Her deep infatuation with Don Ramon seemed like a response to the constant rumor that there was much more than friendship between them. However, this was always strongly denied by both of them. Angeline was grateful for the chance to play the Little Witch, as they called her, and she avoided the controversies that were already creating a tense work environment on the show. In fact, it was said that she was a peaceful and conciliatory person who tried to bring her colleagues together. She knew what a real war was, and above all, she wanted the spirit of camaraderie in El Chavo to remain unbroken, but she couldn't achieve it. Don Ramon's death left a deep mark on her, and was the prelude to her own passing a few years later. Just like her friend, her dependence on tobacco sealed her fate. And on March 25, 1994, she died of a heart attack, her heart already weakened by respiratory and kidney failure. She asked to be buried near Valdés, in the same area of the cemetery. They remain neighbors to this day, just as they were in fiction. That same year, but in February, another name linked to El Chavo had died, Raúl Chato Padilla, who played Jaimito al Cartero Cercado, because of diabetes. For years, there was a rumor that he had died of a heart attack on the set of El Chavo del Ocho. By then, the actor was working on another Chespirito production, Los Caquitos. Although many claim that Bolaños was the one who found Padilla lifeless, in his autobiography, the creator of the show confirmed that he found out over the phone when one of his sons called to tell him the sad news. Thus, 1994 was a tragic year that marked the end of the golden era. And from then on, the problems only got worse. The
dispute over Chilindrina.
If Chespirito's confrontation with Villagrán over Kiko was a fierce battle, what happened with Chilindrina wasn't far behind. It was a dispute that lasted for 12 long years, with a single goal to decide who was the real owner of the character. For Chespirito, his authorship was undeniable. But Maria Antonieta argued, along the same lines as Villagrán, that the audience knew the character thanks to the way she had portrayed her.
I know that the characters and the idea were yours, but each of us brought our own characterization, our ideas, our way of being. And you don't want to play El Chavo anymore, but I do want to keep being La Chilindrina, and I wanted to keep just my little spot. While he was doing
the Caquitos and Florinda played La Chimotrufia, I said, no, forgive me, I haven't given my life to
La Chilindrina just to stop being La Chilindrina now.
She also took credit for some catchphrases and gestures. On the other hand, she wanted the freedom to put on the Chilindrina costume even if she was no longer on the show. While things with Kiko quickly escalated to the legal arena, with Chilindrina it was different. In the early years, even before El Chavo came to light, Maria Antonieta and Chespirito had formed a strong friendship. They went everywhere together, and even in the halls of Televisa, there were rumors that they were lovers. According to the actress, at first Chespirito had authorized her to keep using the character outside the show, but then he changed his mind. Until well into the 90s, the relationship remained good, but things changed when Maria Antonieta was forbidden from playing La Chilindrina once El Chavo ended. To make matters worse, she had big plans. She wanted to record an album, make more shows focused on the girl, and even a movie. Maria Antonieta accused Televisa of trying to make her sign a contract that would leave her with nothing, and she refused. In her autobiography, she raised the debate about who was the real owner of the character, the one who wrote the episodes or those who played them. She continued as La Chilindrina, but with less success than before. At the same time, Maria Antonieta accused Florinda of isolating Chespirito and fueling the conflict around her character. On several occasions, Maria Antonieta claimed that she wanted to talk to Chespirito to fix things, but Florinda would answer the phone and prevent them from communicating. In 2013, Maria Antonieta announced during a trip to Lima that she had won the rights to the character.
the rights for none of them have been renewed for 15 years, and they have to be renewed every 5 years. It's free, and if you want,
you can register them all. It was exactly a year before Chespirito passed away, but unfortunately, the actors never managed to reconcile.
Now, who can defend us?
In 2000 and 2006, Chespirito was once again criticized for appearing in television ads supporting the electoral campaigns of the National Action Party. In April 2007, he joined the demands of Catholic and conservative groups who fought to keep abortion as a crime in Mexico City, even participating in a campaign against the law. Beyond these attitudes that put him at odds with part of his audience in the last years of his life, Roberto Gómez Bolaños was getting worse and worse. After a prostate surgery, in 2009 his public appearances became more spaced out and also gave rise to a sea of speculation. He was seen in a wheelchair with oxygen assistance and gradually losing his ability to respond to journalists. Florinda always accompanied him to interviews and events, often interrupting. Some media outlets said that he was demented, that he had been disconnected from reality for years. During that time, everything was said, and the more unusual the theories were, the more copies they sold. At a certain point, Televisa organized a big event in honor of Chespirito, which lasted 15 hours and went over everything, all of the artists' work. All the actors from every stage of the show appeared on the program, even Villagrán. But it was just a truce for the cameras. As soon as the record light went off, the war continued. From time to time, Roberto would post on social media, make fun of the fake news about his death, and crack a joke. Many believed that those posts were made by someone else trying to impersonate the comedy boss. Villagrán even said that Florinda physically abused Chespirito and then delivered the final blow. He accused her of having fabricated the details of his death in order to profit from more and better events.
Comments from a lot of people saying that she used to hit him.
as a television series, the show, if you haven't seen it, she kept asking for more money, and they said yes.
Just in case, here in Argentina.
In case, I am your contact here. They have more volume on the microphone. I don't know how to turn up the microphone volume. Tell her about the music.
Tip for sleeping, a good nap.
Of the two I counted, no. I think it's the other way around. The tip is the good nap. That's the one that helps. Now what?
Do you say to me when I tell you that you fall asleep very easily?
Well, that I'm a man.
Easy. He used to smoke 4 packs a day of Delicado cigarettes. They were oval-shaped and unfiltered. Carlos Villagran and Roberto Gómez's collaboration is like a cat in reverse, pure dynamite. But how did they end up working together? Hello?
First, someone else arrived, then he arrived.
Ruben Aguirre arrives first. And I had started to be El Chavo.
But no, but not then, because I didn't come in with El Chavo. I came in long before El Chavo.
Bolaños officially died on November 28, 2014 at his Acapulco home from respiratory issues. It was later revealed that he suffered from advanced Parkinson's. He was 85 years old and many had already predicted that the end was near. 2 major events were organized to say goodbye to them, one private at the Televisa facilities and another public at the Azteca Stadium. But the idea always lingered that such a display was only possible by falsifying the dates. As we said, Villagran was one of the main people responsible for spreading this rumor. There was even talk of an empty coffin. Not long ago, certain groups claimed that the death of Chespirito and his funeral were a perfect smokescreen to divert attention from a case that just a few months earlier had shocked Mexico. We're talking about the disappearance of 43 students from Ayotzinapa by official organizations that tried to silence their protests and social demands. Not only that, there are those who see in the career of Gómez Bolaños a man who was very useful to those in power at the time. A man always willing to serve as a distraction while all kinds of abuses were being committed from the spheres of power. Is it true that he was the perfect mascot for many Latin American dictatorships that used his show to keep the masses asleep? Is it true that his creation only wanted to romanticize poverty so that the big shots could keep making more and more deals? How much of this was the author aware of? In the decade that has passed since the death of Chespirito until today, much of the audience has continued to harbor a great deal of resentment toward Florinda. And just when it seemed like the worst was over, the weekly premiere of Sin Querer, Queriendo arrived to rekindle the fire of an eternal controversy.
The definitive end?
The Max Platform biopic should be seen as the account from the Bolaños family and his children. And the way they reconstruct the figure of a man who shined and also had very dark shadows. In El Chavo, who still lives on in the memory of many. The laughter always turned sentimental. There was plenty of criticism of modern society and its dehumanization. It's true that over time there have been some paradigm shifts. The show would be criticized for exposing children to violence and for promoting stereotypes. Even so, it managed to survive much better than other much more recent shows. Over the years, a fandom also developed, which even began to look for a crazier and more metaphorical subplot in El Chavo del Ocho, as if the neighborhood were actually some kind of lost island, a sort of limbo. Also, of course, it was said that each character in the series represented a deadly sin. Ultimately, maybe that's not so important. Only the certainty remains that the duo Chespirito-Florinda did nothing but feed greed. They were the driving force behind the decisions that exhausted a globally successful product. Or was it inevitable that sooner or later the formula would stop working? Did the ego war only come from Chespirito's side, or was there another side that was just as or even more ambitious and vain than he was? Florinda Meza still appears in the media today and makes long posts in which she quotes old interviews with Bolaños and refers to her own memories. She explains in detail why, in her view, the series is lying.
My life, my name, my career, my ability to attract people belong to me. It's my identity that will be used, that will be called into question.
Meanwhile, Sin Querer, Queriendo ignites fresh controversy with each new weekly episode. Is it a faithful reconstruction or an idealized one? Were Villagran and Florinda really as they're portrayed, or are they just villains in a story told from a biased perspective? While the debate remains open, Florinda is preparing her counterattack and has already announced that she will release her own documentary telling her side of the story. Will it be enough to clear her name and, in the process, also clear Le Chespiritos? It would also be interesting to ask ourselves, without all this background, would El Chavo del Ocho still be interesting to us? Or are we witnessing the symptoms of a phenomenon that has already peaked and is now just cannibalizing itself?